How does a guy from Portstewart end up playing Woodstock?
Just by chance, and like Joe had number one with little help from my friends, and that's when the Grease band were working. And we travelled up and down, of course, like everybody else. And when number one, when Joe got to number one, it opened the door to America, and so that we did lots of tours of America. And at that time, there was a lot of festivals. You would have had the Atlanta Pop Festival, this festival, that festival, you know, and the majority of the people who would have played, apart from Woodstock, at these festivals would have been the same from the day before or 2 days before. Like, could have been Johnny Rivers, like a touring package almost, you know. And Woodstock was one of the dates it was in. We went along and realised during the course of the 2 days prior to it how big it was going to be with helicopters and all the rest of it, you know. So they sort of got everybody there by helicopter. You did your gig, hung around for an hour, and got airlifted back to the hotel, you know, about 20 mile away. But that was roughly how I got from Portstewart to Woodstock.
When you first went to London, you were in a band called Heir Apparent, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
And you actually toured with Jimi Hendrix, isn't that correct?
Well, we had the same manager, Chad Chandler. He used to be at the bass player in the Old Animals. And but the package tour in them days, it had The Move, Eamon Corner, Pink Floyd, Jimi Hendrix, Heir Apparent, The Nice. You know, we got like 10 minutes. Hendrix got half an hour, but the whole, like, it was like a variety show almost. You know, it sort of. That was the next thing, you know. After that, it just got too expansive, the whole rock and roll thing. So those travelling shows, so to speak, were sort of drifting off and fading into the distance. It's sort of from the old vaudeville days almost, you know, like you'd have about 10 or 12 people. Some guy would go in and tell a joke, somebody would do a bit of dancing and stuff, you know.
The list of people that you've worked with is just endless, and of course the big one that I want to ask you about is being part of Wings with Paul McCartney. How did you first meet Paul?
I got an invite to go down to the reception for his Wildlife album, and we went down, and he knew, of course, who I was and from Joe and stuff that I had done before, you know, and I got an invite to go down, and went down, and we sort of threw a few tunes about for about 2 or 3 days, and then he just says, like, well, do you want a job? I said, absolutely.
Of course.
It was a great time, you know, and I was honoured to be asked to go play with them, you know, because I'd grown up with the Beatles and the Stones and all that sort of stuff, you know. I even had my Beatle haircut at one point.
All right, yeah.
I just found a Beatle job.
There you go. Yeah.
I bought that in Carrickfergus yesterday.
Really?
And Dr. Bernardo's. That's the God's truth, yeah. So I thought I'd show it off here at the Belfast Festival. We had a transit with no windows, sliding door, and we had dogs, kids, and band, and behind a small truck with a PA. And it was almost, you know, that same situation, vaudeville thing. Everybody, we never stayed in hotels. It was always B&Bs or something, you know. But it was just a case of where are we going today? Let's get the map out, you know. And we went off and did like a university tour like that, just turning up and asking them would they mind of of course, Paul McCartney played tonight, and it was brilliant. After the gig, there was all these 50p's, you know, that's what it cost to get in. 6 for you, 6 for you.
How many did he take?
Same as everybody else.
Did he?
Oh, aye. Yeah, that was the fun of it, you know, big bag of 50p's, you know. And then a quick hooray and away to the next gig.
So moving on from that then, I mean, you also worked with Andrew Lloyd Webber, didn't you, on the Jesus Christ Superstar album?
I did that. It was the Grease band were the backing band for it, and we went in and along with Andrew Lloyd Webber and ran through what had to be done during the course of that day. And then we laid down all the tracks, and whenever that was finished, then the vocalists were brought in for different things, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the Grease band that did the whole thing for it, you know.
Oh, right, that's right.
And that was nice. And the funny thing, they had Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat or something, and it had sort of made a few ripples. And they'd asked the Grease band, "Is Jesus Christ Superstar, would you like paid now, or will you take a percentage?"
Yeah.
You know. So we said, "Oh no, we need the money now." So they give us 500 quid or something, and we lost about 2.5 million, you know, like
my
each.
God.
No, that's just the way it works. Not being able to read music as well as some piano players would do, you know. I would have gone in an hour earlier with Andrew Lloyd Webber, and whenever there was a little bit of a solo, he'd have tinkled, and I would have plucked.
Yeah.
And memory, you know, and that was from working with show bands. Once you heard a thing, like, you know, it was, you know, you could learn Apache on the guitar, you know, and Note for Life and all that, you know.
Show bands were good training then for you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The best training I think I had. You know, I was a bit of a rebel at the end of the day, but when I joined show bands, the band I was with, the Skyrockets from Mccullough, and they would have been of an older generation, you know. And so there was they would have listened to Frank Sinatra, for instance, you know, in the older days, and I would have been starting to listen to Dylan and Chuck Berry and Jerry Lee and all the rest of it, you know. And I was part of the young generation, and consequently went with my head, you know, and went off to England and to join up with the people that became heir apparent.
Last time we spoke as well, you were telling me about the Gibson guitar that disappeared, didn't it, on a recent trip you were on?
Well, well, it's 3 years ago now. We were in Poland, and my beloved 335 that I'd had for 32 years and played, you know, it went missing at Thief Row.
Yeah.
And I never saw it again, but people have it on the internet. Actually, Henry Mccullough's guitar, great player, 335, but I cannot get through to any other place apart from Burlington in Massachusetts. But I have a couple of people that are working on it for me that are a bit more skilled in bypassing things. And in saying that, all the sadness for a couple of weeks that occurs and things like that, there was people knocking on the door and giving me guitars and all the rest of it. They weren't all good, but at least it was the gesture, you know.